and joyous occasion. I'm glad to see you folks are in the right mood for it. I'm really honored to be here as a part of it. I'm Ben. Here is Ben. You know, Dean Corren's candidacy is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for Democrats and progressives to unite around a common set of values. That all people deserve decent health care, that our environment is precious, and that Vermont welcomes sustainable businesses. Some say that the incumbent has the advantage. Well, that's what they said about Haagen-Dazs. Some say that you're new and you don't know nothing, and that you'll never beat the moneyed interest and the way the system is rigged. Well, that's what they said about Ben and Jerry's and the Pillsbury Doughboy. Dean Corren has a vision for Vermont that looks to the future. An economy based on the creativity of our young people, the strength of the Vermont brand, and the thrift and ingenuity of our farming heritage. Dean Corren's candidacy is a triumph over cronyism and a campaign finance system that favors corporations and the wealthy. And Dean Corren's election in November will be a victory for the people of Vermont.
Well, thank you, Ben. As was mentioned, I am Jerry, and I am the only person here who's even more excited than Ben. and if you look very closely, you'll see why. Up here, on the sign, Treasurer. We are going to hear from Dean in a minute. We have a few speakers that are going to regale us for a couple of minutes. And our first, to my right, is Dr. Deb Richter. Dr. Deb, as she's known, wrote a prescription for Vermont in 1999. And she has worked tirelessly since then to make sure that prescription gets filled correctly in order for every single Vermonter to have excellent health care regardless of their income. As a physician, she has seen firsthand how dysfunctional our system is, and she believes that Vermont can lead the nation in real health care reform. Dr. Deb Richter.
Why do we need Dean Corren for Lieutenant Governor? I mean, you know, I know Phil Scott. I think he's a nice guy. And I hear this a lot. He's a very, very nice guy, and he's very good at getting elected. But that is not what we need right now. We need a leader with strong convictions about fairness and equity in health care. We need Dean Corren for Lieutenant Governor. As you know, we are poised to become the first state in the nation to enact a single-payer, publicly funded, universal health care system. Medicare for all in Vermont, if you want to call it that. So if you're ever looking for a reason why we need single-payer, you need to look no further than the exchange. What a mess the exchange has been. And people ask, well, you know, how can we, if we're, you know, we can't even run that, how can we possibly do single payer? Well, I think we need to understand that one of the reasons it's such a mess is because of the complicated enrollment. There's hundreds of processes and procedures just to determine eligibility for enrollment and subsidy. How about under single payer? There's just one question. Are you a Vermont resident? Yes, you're enrolled. Done. People that Medicare, which is also a single payer, took less than 6 months to enroll 15 million people without computers, using just index cards. Single payer is a simple concept. That is one feature of a publicly funded universal healthcare system, the simplicity. But let's not, the most important factor of why we're all here is the human factor. That means healthcare for everyone. And fair financing, divorced from employment, and also divorced from your illness, so that you can see your doctor when you need your doctor and not have to worry about paying for care. Phil Scott has no intention of pushing for single payer. He thinks things are pretty good just the way they are. So it's going to be a very heavy lift. It's going to be difficult getting a financing plan, which is what we need to do next session. We've got to get that passed through our legislature next session. We need a lieutenant governor who can help carry the load. We need a lieutenant governor who's not only a nice guy, but someone who lives up to his promises. We need Dean Corren for lieutenant governor.
Is a leader in creating a new model for sustainable business development. Burlington has not been the same since she arrived on the scene. Melinda has won numerous awards for her innovative business practices and her no-holds-barred approach to getting things done that benefit the community. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Melinda Moulton.
My name is Melinda Moulton, and I am a Democrat. And I am standing here today in support of Dean Corren as our next Lieutenant Governor for Vermont.
Thank you.
Dean Corren is a progressive, and he believes in the issues that most Democrats believe in: economic development and job creation, fair taxation, conservation and environmental protection, climate change and energy policy, campaign finance reform and public financing, education, health care for all, and women's reproductive health and choice. But this afternoon, I want to focus on Dean Corren, the businessman. Dean is the Chief Technology Officer of Verdant Power, which is a sustainable energy company that develops underwater hydropower systems to produce energy. Back in 1977, Dean received a patent on a turbine rotor designed to tap the power of moon-driven tides. His creation was, quite simply, electricity. Corren graduated from Middlebury College and went on to get his master's degree in energy science from NYU. His thesis focused on the concept that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would create a greenhouse effect, which today is known as global warming. Now, Dean wrote this thesis almost 40 years ago. He is truly a visionary and a highly successful businessman, and his work in kinetic hydropower systems to produce energy is big business, and his studies and his designs have been identified as most promising. As a fellow business owner, Dean knows the importance of separating healthcare from employment, which for many businesses is 20% of a company's payroll. He understands this financial burden on small business, which is why he supports single-payer healthcare. He also understands how important it is to preserve an open internet. He recently stated, "Let's not create a race to the bottom in which the largest companies can outbid Vermont startups and growth companies for bandwidth. We must preserve equal access across the board." I believe we all want a lieutenant governor who believes in a Vermont that is economically strong while serving and supporting and lifting up our citizens most in need. Dean Corren understands the importance of a strong middle class because democracy cannot sustain itself when we have a huge gap between rich and poor. So in conclusion, and for these reasons, I stand here with all of you today in support of Dean Corren, who is a bright visionary, an astute businessman, and a kind-hearted and caring Vermont. And I have to ask all the Vermonters and all of the Democrats out there, please write in Dean Corren for Lieutenant Governor on the Democratic primary ballot on August 26th. So please do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Melinda. Kathy Bloom is the coolest thing to happen to global warming since Bill McKibben. She works with Bill via 350.org, and she tells it like it is with a light touch. She manages to leave people feeling hopeful and empowered, which, when it comes to climate change, is no small task. Thanks, Kathy.
I am so honored to be here, and in fact, I'm a little nervous and giddy, partly because I like to think of Ben and Jerry as my own personal rabbis. Lord knows I have worshipped at their temple often enough. I like to think of a waffle cone filled with Cherry Garcia as kind of like Jewish communion. Definitely see God afterwards. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about that, unfortunately. I'm here for the fun and games portion of the program. I have both the honor and the responsibility of talking about climate change, which is the part where you all go, yay! Okay, so when it comes to climate change, we all know a few important things. We know that it's real. We know that it's happening now. We know that it's accelerating rapidly. We know that we're blowing through all the major tipping points on the road to a runaway, make the earth uninhabitable type situation, and that out of the whole range of possible scientific projections, things are basically unfolding in a worst case scenario, catastrophe dead ahead kind of thing. And that's a satisfying and fun situation if you're an overachiever like me. But there are some more stuff that we know. We know that climate change affects every single person on the planet. And that means all of you, and everyone you know and love, even the people who totally annoy you. It affects them too. It even affects Republicans. We know that climate change demands that we divest ourselves and all of our multitudinous modes of modern living from fossil fuels as fast as we can. That means all our systems of agriculture, energy generation, manufacturing, construction, transportation, urban planning, economy, pretty much every single aspect of our lives, which is a great big deal and difficult to do. We know that climate change is an urgent, all-hands-on-deck sort of situation, and we need everyone in every walk of life working for bold, visionary solutions, building vigorous response plans, and creating robust networks of resilience. We need every person in this room, no matter who you are, or what you do, or how much you think you know. But we also need strong, committed leadership, and this is where Dean Corren comes into the picture. We need leaders who are willing to throw down an unequivocal no to building any new fossil fuel infrastructure. We need leaders who are willing to shout out a brilliant, full-throated yes to Vermont's goal of 90% renewables by 2050 and hold our feet to the fire until we get there, and of course, to divesting from fossil fuels. We need leaders who will make a titanium-strong commitment to investing in energy efficiency and conservation, retrofitting all our buildings, and creating a comprehensive, affordable public transportation system. We need leaders who unabashedly support the growth of local food systems, who wholeheartedly believe in creating a steady-state economy, and who will launch a holy crusade for putting a mighty tax on carbon. We need honest, unflinching leaders who can look us in the eye and say, yes, this is a global crisis. And yes, it's a local crisis. And yes, it's going to be a bumpy ride. But it's also a significant opportunity for wholesale transformation to a better way of doing things. We have the tools we need to make our own solutions. All we need is political will, and I am brave and bold and courageous and excited and willful enough to help implement them. We need leaders to make a solemn vow that they will not shirk, that they will not play politics, that they will not, under any circumstances, be beholden to fossil fuel interests. We need them to say, I will work for local solutions in Vermont, which can be replicated nationwide because it is our moral and ethical responsibility to lead the way. I will help forge a swift path to a healthy, vibrant, post-carbon world, and I will champion social and environmental justice at every step along the way. And to have leaders who say those things, they need to be heroic, solid climate champions. And if we're searching for heroic, solid climate champions who have the capacity to be that kind of leader, we need look no farther than Dean Corren. He's on VPIRB's Board of Trustees. He develops renewable energy systems based on the movement of the moon, which is so cool. He was chair of the Burlington Electric Commission and promoted highly successful energy efficiency measures and ended their use of power from Vermont Yankee a good dozen years ago. And he believes that strong climate response is essential to a healthy future. Dean Corren is a climate champion. Dean Corren is a fearless leader. Dean Corren is running for Lieutenant Governor of Vermont, and we would be oh so lucky to have him. So go out and get this man elected.
One of those guys who is living lightly on the land, on two wheels, is Don Mayer, the founder of Small Dog Electronics. As a young man, Don returned his draft card to the Selective Service with a letter as an act of civil disobedience. He then called the FBI to ask them why they hadn't come looking for him. Don describes his sustainable business mission as follows. The effect we have on our environment, community, customers, and employees is just as important as maintaining our profitability. It is my honor to now bring you straight from the extreme left-hand side of the table.
So I did ride here on two wheels. I rode on my Victory Vision with my wife. And Vision is a great name for a motorcycle, but it's also a great characteristic of a good leader. And Dean Corren has vision. Whether it is introducing the first single-payer bill over 20 years ago in the Vermont legislature, whether it's thinking about how do we take advantage of the tidal currents by dropping turbines in the East River, or whether it's understanding that Vermont's economy is based upon the entrepreneurs that we have spread out on our state in the mountains. A couple weeks ago, I was on a motorcycle ride with a bunch of investors and entrepreneurs and business people, and we went all over the state, and we listened to business pitches. And we listened to business pitches about sustainable food, about IT infrastructure, about people that wanted to make apps, about people that were making food or wanted to have a food cart. And it was very apparent to me that what Dean says is actually true, that it is these kind of people that are the backbone of our economy, and they're the people that we have to nurture if the state's economy is going to be strong and if we're going to create jobs. I was talking to Dean a couple weeks ago about his turbine, and I recall a conversation I had with an engineer when I started North Wind Power Company. We were making wind turbines, but this engineer came to me with a design of a tidal generator. And he had gone so far as to extrapolate that if you put enough of these in the ocean, that it would actually slow down the rotation of the Earth. So I was talking to Dean about it, so I was a little concerned that this thing was going to slow down the Earth. He said we're a lot, very, very far away from that, and it's really in no danger. But I think most importantly, I have been working on healthcare reform for 30 years. Dean has been working on it for just as long. I pay a lot of taxes as a business person. I pay payroll taxes, I pay income taxes. There's a tax that I pay that not everybody has to pay, and that's the health insurance tax, the health care tax. And as Deb mentioned, it's for my company, it's 22% of my payroll. For another company, it might be 5%, or another company, it might be 0. And the coverages are all over the map. You might have a $5,000 deductible, a $10,000 deductible, a $5,000 copay, or a 0 copay. But the taxes seem to be voluntary. I could make the choice. I could pay 0% payroll, and there's no implication. With a single-payer universal health care decoupled from employment, it's a different story. And the governor and the legislature have gotten us to the finish line. We're on the goal line right now, and the defense is firming up. The defense has some heavy hitters. They're putting on the goal line. And we need our own heavy hitter on that goal line. We need Dean Corren as Lieutenant Governor, and I urge you to work to get him elected.
Thank you, Don. I just love everybody up here. This is like so amazing to be sitting here. And we have just been joined by Senator Anthony Polina from Washington County. He's been on the front lines of Vermont politics for decades, Anthony? Eons. From founding rural Vermont to help Vermont farmers get a fair share for their product and give them an effective voice on agricultural policy. He is a relentless advocate for reducing the costs of higher education and fighting for a state bank. Anthony has challenged the political status quo from the grassroots outside the State House and now from his seat in the Vermont Senate. Anthony, please go ahead.
Sorry I was late. I was actually up at Cabot with our United States Senator, so I bugged out earlier and I'll be here. I really just want to make 2 points, and not having heard what other people have said, hopefully I'm not going to be too redundant, although I think in these kinds of things redundancy is sort of what happens a lot of the time, because everybody has a lot of good things to say about the person that we're talking about. But I want to talk about 2 things. One, I want to be really clear for those of you who are not quite sure that the office of Lieutenant Governor is not a symbolic office. Sometimes people will say, well, what does the Lieutenant Governor do anyway? What difference does it make? Why should we work hard to get somebody elected Lieutenant Governor? The Lieutenant Governor doesn't do anything except pretend they're governor when the governor's out of town. That's simply not true. As someone who has sat in the Senate for the last couple of years and has watched very closely how the Senate operates, I guarantee you that it is very important who the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Vermont is. From being a part of selecting who sits on what committees, who's going to be the chair of the Healthcare Committee, who's going to be the chair of the Finance Committee, where the Progressive's going to sit, where the Republican's going to sit. The Lieutenant Governor is intimately involved in that process. In terms of the rulemaking process, in terms of how the flow of legislation comes through the Senate, the Lieutenant Governor is an important part of that process. In terms of setting priorities as to what comes to the floor and when, the Lieutenant Governor is a part of that process. One of the more interesting things is deciding what is germane or relevant to a bill that's being debated. We had a number of occasions, I don't know whether opportunities is the right word, but a number of times many of us in the Senate tried to move forward with a bill that would allow child care workers to organize. We eventually did do that. It's a long and winding story. But a lot of what it had to do with was finding a way to make sure that bill was heard on the Senate floor so we can get a straight up or down vote on it. And so we tried to attach it to various bills that were quite relevant to other kinds of labor bills. But it's up to the Lieutenant Governor, with some help from the Secretary of the Senate, but it's up to the Lieutenant Governor to decide if those things are relevant, and if they can, it should be debated. That's an important role for any party to take. Also, breaking tie votes is an important role for the Lieutenant Governor. It doesn't happen that often, but oddly enough, it happens when something is really important and the Senate is split and there's a lot of strong feelings on both sides. It's kind of rare to have a tie vote on the Senate. But when you have a tie vote on the Senate, it's really important that the Lieutenant Governor be on your side with that vote if you want to win that vote. So the Lieutenant Governor plays an important role there. Plus, for what it's worth, the Lieutenant Governor is one of the very few people in this building that actually has staff people. That actually has an office, that has a place where you can meet and decide what to organize around and how you're going to go about doing that organizing. So again, the Lieutenant Governor has a lot of influence over what happens in this building. And as the second highest office holder in the state, the Lieutenant Governor has a lot of influence over shaping the debate that happens outside this building as well. The Lieutenant Governor has the time often to shape that debate as well during the off-season. So again, without being redundant, it is important who is elected Lieutenant Governor, and it is important that the Lieutenant Governor be someone who is progressive-minded and forward-thinking, because that's where the majority of Vermonters are. Second thing I just want to mention briefly is this idea of leadership. You know, and I think oftentimes we sometimes forget who our leaders are. And we do that in part sometimes because we have short-term political memories. You know, we forget what happened 10 years ago, and we praise the Senate for shutting down Vermont Yankee at the time, for example. And we forget that there were activists who sat down in front of Vermont Yankee 30 years ago and started that movement to shut down Vermont Yankee. We forget about those activists, and we praise those senators who made the courageous vote 30 years after the citizens decided it was time to do something. So sometimes it's short-term memory. Sometimes, though, it's frankly because leaders are doing what leaders do. They're leading. And by the time we all catch up with them, those leaders are on to other things because they've done their work of providing that leadership. And that's a role that Dean Corren has played very dramatically over the years. And I know you've heard about this already, but we talk about some of the bigger social and cultural issues in the state of Vermont, like marriage equality. We praise the courage of those senators and House members, rightfully so, who voted for marriage equality. We forget that Dean Corren introduced the first marriage equality bill 20 years earlier than that. We're all involved in this healthcare fight, and we're, praising those leaders in the Senate and in the House and in the governor's office and elsewhere who are willing to provide leadership on healthcare reform. And single-payer healthcare has now become sort of the accepted thing in the state of Vermont. Nobody's quite sure how we're going to get there, but everybody's pretty sure that that's where they want to go. It's been an important transition and a development in the state of Vermont that people are so accepting of single-payer healthcare and universal healthcare. So it's easy to forget the fact that Dean Corren introduced a bill to do just that about 20 years ago, because he was a leader then, and it's easy to forget sometimes what leaders do. We talk about the influence or the importance of renewable energy to our economy. And we talk a lot about in economic development in this building and in the economic development bills. We need to encourage entrepreneurship and have legislators who understand entrepreneurs and understand the important role of renewable energy. Well, Dean Corren's been working on renewable energy and been an entrepreneur for a long time. So I guess I just wanted us to realize that that's an important message for us to bring to Vermonters, that sometimes because you have not heard of someone for a while, it's not because they haven't been doing things for a while. It's because you just caught up to the things that they were doing 20 years ago. Now they're off doing other kinds of things. So that leadership and that vision and that willingness to hold there in the years to come, it's really important that we have as many people on board as possible. And given the role that the Lieutenant Governor plays in this building and as a voice for citizens around the state, it's really important that we have a Lieutenant Governor who's going to stick with us every step of the way. So leadership and vision being practical, being able to get things done. That's what Dean Corren's about, and that's why I'm really glad he's going to be our next Lieutenant Governor.
To be following Anthony. Mari Cortez is the president of Fletcher Allen Nurses and the president of the Vermont American Federation of Teachers. She's the leader in Vermont labor movement and in recent efforts to unionize Vermont's small child care providers. She's an outspoken advocate for paid sick days and much, much, much more. Mari knows the way to win labor gains is to rally the Vermont community to support these efforts. And so it is my pleasure to introduce to you now, Mari Cortez.
Myself that my speech is on an iPad and it actually has a small dog sticker on the iPad. I am a proud union nurse. How many here are union members, work for a union, whether you volunteer or you get paid for it, or have a family member who is a union member? So if I could hear from you. Many of you that just hooted and hollered are really excited about Dean Corren for Lieutenant Governor. Me too. And when I first learned that Dean Corren was considering running for Lieutenant Governor, it made immediate sense. And as you heard just in this small room, the labor community is energized about the prospect of a progressive Lieutenant Governor that will stand strong for progressive values and the people's issues. Dean Corren is an experienced leader and is bright, articulate, and courageous. Labor used to be known as the community, not the scapegoat of those that would tear the social gains of the last century out of the hands of those that need it most, just to make another buck. And much of the advancement of the last centuries have been won from the hands and the backs and the hearts and the brains of labor. And today, labor is the community. We are community mental health and home health care workers, educators, bus drivers, snowplow drivers, nurses, technicians, social workers, skilled tradespeople, college and university staff, and those who prepare and provide all of us with quality food. We deliver your mail, your packages, and we deliver your babies. We care for the environment, and we engineer solutions. We need elected leaders who recognize that to dismiss or attack working people is dismissing and attacking the heart of our communities. Dean Corren not only knows this, he lives it and he leads it. In the State House, he supported labor causes because labor issues are everyone's issues. Dean Corren also fights for our public institutions because he knows of the perils of privatization and profitization. And he recognizes that historically, more than any elected leader, it has been people, labor, that have shaped and continue to shape this country. And that is why he voted in the State House every single time for the causes that they championed. Here is a leader that will stand strong for the community and for long-fought and hard-won workplace rights and dignity, for health care for all, livable wages for all, paid sick days, and the ability to use those sick days without fear of being fired. And for work environments free from violence, where the voice of the frontline worker, those who really know what we need to give you quality and safe services and products, that voice is not diminished, disparaged, or oppressed, but recognized and celebrated
as a high priority value in each organization. This is a critical time in history for Vermont and for the entire planet. A watershed moment on a precipice. And we must get it right today, now. We cannot afford to be tentative. We have what we need today with each other and with Dean Corren to bring conclusive progressive advancements, with all of us working together for common good, and with leaders like Dean Corren that support progress and are bold enough to demand it. We must make the best choice now, and that choice is Dean Corren for Lieutenant Governor.
And thank you, everybody. It's great hearing from everyone. And we are now at the moment we are so excited about, ready to hear from the next Lieutenant Governor from the state of Vermont, Dean Corren.
Let's put an end to this. I would say that I highly recommend getting a group of Vermont's greatest overachievers together and have them try to top each other, saying nice things about it. But fun and games are over. Now we're going to get down to some serious work. First I have to blame Martha Abbott. Where's Martha? She's got to be here somewhere. She's hiding. You're all here on this lovely Saturday because of Martha Abbott, number one. She asked me to run in May, and for some reason, which I'll tell you about, although it's normally very easy to say no, for hundreds of reasons, there are always hundreds of great reasons not to run for anything like this. For some reason I didn't say no, and that has to do with the next two reasons. The next reason is healthcare reform. We have a governor who's committed to healthcare reform now. We, in this room, and many others, asked him to do that. He said he would do it, he followed through doing it, and he's still doing it. That's the second reason. The next reason is that we have a legislature with that leadership, and others, Anthony, for example, that put together a law. And this law says some very, very good things. I'm going to quote from the very beginning of the law. Act 48. It is the intent of the General Assembly to create Green Mountain Care, to contain costs, and to provide as a public good, comprehensive, affordable, high-quality, publicly financed health care coverage for all Vermont residents in a seamless manner, regardless of income, assets, health status, or availability of other coverage. This was a victory for many people in this room. And as someone who's been at this a long time, in fact, I was digging through my files last night. We have analyses of single-payer health care on media we can't even read it. Floppy, you know what this is called? The next reason, and the last in this list, is that I blame our current Lieutenant Governor. Because in the process of trying to answer Martha's question, I made the mistake of looking at his website. I suggest you take a look at it. You'll want to run too. So on May 7th, with the okay from Cindy, my wife, more about which later, I said yes to Martha. And I said, if we're going to do this, we have to do it with public financing. The press has since asked me, did you run because they doubled the amount in the public financing? And I had to admit, I was entirely unaware of that. It turned out that by the time I decided we had 38 days in which to qualify, something that even when we got Anthony qualified many years ago, more than 99, 2000, we hadn't come anywhere close to that kind of time frame. What really was a surprise is Martha and Meg and others put together this county by county coordinated effort throughout the state, and in 37 days, just one day short of the deadline, managed to do it. People actually remembered me, which was a huge surprise to me. So suddenly, it's June 12th, and money is not a problem in this campaign. We will have a competitive amount of money, $200,000. It sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot when you look at the fact that our opponent will probably spend considerably more than that. But that's the first thing that happened that means we can win this race. The second thing was a very gracious Democratic fellow named John Bauer, who had been trying to run, had been trying to qualify, truly believes in public financing as a means of letting the voters' voice really be heard in elections, otherwise known as democracy, decided that we deserved, because of that credibility of organization that many of the folks in this room did, that we deserved a one-on-one shot against the Republican incumbent. That's the second reason we have a really good shot at winning. That was quickly followed by the third reason, which is we were endorsed by the Democratic governor of the state of Vermont. And that is not something to be underestimated. Since that time, we put together many other elements that make this a winnable race. One is that I have talked, and I'll get into this a little bit more in a minute, I have talked to the state committee of the Democratic Party. They were incredibly welcoming and are willing, after the primary on August 26th, to not only allow me to have the nomination, but also to endorse me as a unity candidate for governor. It's something that we actually intend to that time, we've been going around the state, we've been going to various fairs and all sorts of events around the state, and I want to point out someone that I met, a Democrat who is going to be, is going to be one of the leaders of the legislature, Mike McCarthy from St. Albans, who greeted me warmly. Stand up. Warmly at the Franklin County Field Days and introduced me to everybody and invited us back to his kickoff in St. Albans, which was a great event. So thank you, Mike. I hope Mike is one of many and he will help get all the support we need from our Democratic friends. Another thing we've done, fortunately, our opponent is whining about public financing and thinks it's a bad idea to take large private contributions out of our democratic process and let the voters pay for their own elections. So fortunately, he's complying with giving us a terrific issue that most Vermonters really believe in, and especially with what's going on in the Supreme Court saying that money is speech. Vermonters know that money is not speech, and that big money in elections is the opposite of democracy. So we've been able to hold some events. We held a press conference on public finance, calling for public financing for all state elections. And just think about this. For a measly $2 to $3 million per cycle, this particular race is 29 cents per Vermonter every 2 years. But for that kind of money, we can own our election completely. And then when we make a decision about financing health care that's $2 billion, we will have owned a democracy to make that decision. It's the greatest bargain there is. So with public financing, our goal is to not bash anyone else, but to show that it can be done, to show that you can win with public financing if you have a good grassroots campaign and adequate money to get your message out. You can compete with any amount of money that the big money folks raise. And that's our goal, to show that it can be done. To do that, we have to win this election. More things have come our way. Just recently, the largest labor union in the state has endorsed us, taking that endorsement away from the incumbent, and that's the Vermont NEA, for which we're arguing. And we expect many more of those to come as they play out in the next couple of months. Now, and one huge issue that's kind of intangible but very meaningful in this election cycle is that it happens to be the most interesting race in the entire state. Try as anyone might, the media cannot make a race out of the gubernatorial race. Some of you know my background. Some of it, I had no idea how great it was. I'll mention a few things. I went to school at Middlebury. I studied philosophy there and physics. It was the physics, believe it or not, that was the most useful as far as a job. As an electronics engineer by day in New York City and studied dance by night, something else I picked up at Middlebury. I became a research scientist after getting my master's in 1980 at NYU and did research in many areas of renewable energy in particular and some conventional power too, but that was our focus, and we had an atmospheric side and we had a renewable energy side essentially, and the two together really formed a conjunction for me of what we're going to do to avoid what we now call global warming. When I came back to Burlington, I was appointed to the Burlington Electric Commission. There we were able to put into place some of the things we've been talking about in terms of investing in efficiency, investing in local labor to get that efficiency instead of sending money out of the state to buy power, generally dirty power. Those things have made stable the electric bills in Burlington and have allowed us to grow the economy without growing our electric consumption and lower our carbon footprint and many other footprints in terms of environmental impacts in the city of Burlington. We shut down Vermont Yankee in 2002. In 1992, we made that decision. In 2002, it came to pass. We ended up saving money, the lights stayed on, and we tried to be a model for the state. That took another dozen years, and ultimately the decision of Entergy itself in order to do that. But it just shows that those kind of things can be done. We just bought, the voters in Burlington just bought something that we had set up way back then in the early 90s, a 7-megawatt power plant on the Winooski River that's environmentally responsible, and we put in an option to buy now, and the voters just did it right off the bat, and we now have another big chunk of renewable power that is sustainable for our electric supply in Burlington. The state could do that too. The state could have done that with the Deerfield River network. We lost that opportunity. We've lost a lot of opportunities in the state of Vermont. We lost an opportunity to buy Churchill Falls power at 1/4 cent per kilowatt hour for 25 years. We thought, why would we want to do that when we can build Vermont Yankee? We lost by 1 vote. So if you think that your voting doesn't matter on who represents you in this House, in the 60s, that 1 vote caused Yankee to happen instead of a cost-effective power contract that would have helped economic development, put the state of Vermont on a slightly different, much better trajectory than we were on thanks to Vermont Yankee. Now, I also worked for Bernie Sanders. After I left the legislature, you've heard way too much about what I did in the legislature. I worked for Bernie Sanders for 2 years as his outreach director in Vermont. Got to see a lot of more corners of Vermont than I had seen in the legislature, and a lot of federal issues and the interaction with the state issues. And then I went to work with Verdant Power that had been set up back in 2000 to pursue kinetic hydropower underwater, essentially like underwater wind turbines, to collect power from rivers, currents, and ultimately the ocean currents. But with those jobs and jobs in electronics and jobs in other areas, formal and informal, that I've been involved in, I have to say that the job I loved the most and broke my heart most to leave was being in the legislature in this building. Now, we have incredibly exciting times in the state of Vermont. We have confidence. We've accomplished a lot of things in the legislature, and people are behind them. We have a really positive can-do attitude with healthcare reform and GMO labeling and minimum wage increases. Not enough, not a living wage yet, and we're going to keep pushing on that. We're not going to say, oh, we're on that path for 4 years, let it play out, we can relax. We cannot relax. And these are the kind of issues that we care about, Vermonters care about primarily, and these are the common ground of the Democratic and progressive parties that we can work on together as part of this campaign. We have, at the same time, incredible challenges ahead of us with climate change and with actually getting the health care reform done. And that's what we really have to focus on. We have to meet these challenges head on, not just wait for them to roll over us in the case of climate change. We have to seize opportunities to use these to build our economy rather than to be swallowed up by it. There's some wonderful authors recently who are writing great information about this. And to do the health care, we are in this unusual situation where we have one statewide officer of general policy importance who is dragging his feet, who is not working to get this thing done. It is much easier to undermine by not doing anything, by spreading fear and uncertainty, than to actually say we have to do this. Our economy depends on it, our small businesses depend on it, our employees, our people of Vermont depend on this. We can't keep going. You know, when I was in here, we were worried about getting up to total spending on healthcare of $1.5 billion. We're now spending over $5 billion a year on healthcare. How long do you think we can do that for? We can't. We simply can't. So it's not, oh, I'm not sure, I'm skeptical about single payer, we'll see how it works out. It's not going to work out by itself. We have to make it work out. We have to take our heads out of the sand, and we have to work hard and make it happen. And when it needs fixing, we need to fix it. And then the lieutenant governor can be the part of the process, as Anthony said, of going around the state and talking to people, gathering input, but also explaining a system that can be made to sound incredibly complicated, when in fact, at its core, as Deb said, it is extremely, extremely simple. Endless skepticism. You know, skepticism is great, but when it goes on forever, it's no more than foot dragging and fence sitting. And we can't have that. We can't afford that. Vermont has too few officers. Vermont can't afford that on the statewide level in the lieutenant governor's office. So climate change, the need for renewable energy, which is my field of work, is another challenge that we can lead the nation on. We cannot and do not need to lead the nation on everything. But on these two areas, healthcare and climate change, addressing it in a proactive way that's going to benefit our economy, these are things where we have to lead, and these are things where we are leading, and these are things where we will continue to lead. As everybody knows, and has been mentioned here before, and it's mentioned in almost every venue, our current lieutenant governor is a nice guy. I think so too. There was a time when that would have been good enough, a slower, less challenging time, but nice isn't enough anymore. If you want action on health care, if you want action on expanding local, sustainable, renewable energy and the jobs it brings to Vermonters, instead of being rolled over by global warming, nice is no longer good enough. Nice isn't enough if you want organized labor to have the right to organize. Nice isn't enough. In many of the other areas you've heard discussed today, but nice also isn't enough if you want a loved one to be able to make their own end-of-life choices. I have not only supported these areas, I have led in most of these areas. And as the NEA observed, I'm a really nice guy. So we have a very clear choice before us, and we have a very big task before us, so I'm asking for your support and your help. But no money. I'll give you a cautionary note. In the last 3 elections, Democrats have gone up against the Republican incumbents and have lost. And so clearly, I'm not, I may be a policy wonk, but I am not an elections geek, and I don't know all the reasons for this. But I do know that we're going to have to do something different this time than has been done in the last 3 times. And this is an off year. There are going to be a lot of people who don't vote. Young people, lower income people, the people who support us may not come out and vote unless we make it happen. And that's why the people who were in room 10 before, and the people who are in, and got us qualified, and the people who are in room 11 now, and all of the people that you enlist in this effort are going to make that difference. At this point in time, and we're going to put 2 parties together in this unity effort. Now, there have been times when that would have been a very difficult pitch to make, but I'm going to tell you that at this point in time, both of our parties can grow and succeed and represent Vermonters better than they do because we have opportunities to address these very challenging issues. It is also not a zero-sum game. We have seen great strides by the Progressive Party. We have also seen, and those of you who are progressives, you've got to admit it, some real advances on the part of the Democratic Party. And both of the parties can succeed both in numbers and in quality of policies, especially now that there is this opening due to the self-destruction of the Republican Party. Now, I said the same thing to the Democrats, and in case anybody's nostalgic for losing the last statewide Republican officer, Vermont cannot afford to be a museum for moribund political parties. And the Republican Party that many of us had a whole different relationship with, that had a Dick Snelling, that had a George Aiken, that had a Jim Jeffords who was forced to leave it because it left him. That party is long gone and does not exist. So, even though we have an exciting time where Vermont has made a lot of progress on a lot of fronts, as we've mentioned, we want more. We are not satisfied with where we are right at this point in time. Obviously not with the job half done on healthcare reform. So our 2 distinct and separate parties can work together in this race on these issues and get some of this done, far more important than many of the other things that we fight about here in this building. The happiest thing, without a doubt, that I learned while I was a legislator is that you can stick to your principles and have them guide you and have them show you the direction while still compromising with people, getting along with people, collaborating on solutions with many of the people here who don't automatically share your views from the start. And that involves work. So I'm happy to be in this position, although I do blame Martha Abbott. And I think Vermonters as a whole realize that we can have parties compete, or people compete, but also cooperate and get the job done for the state of Vermont. And that, what we might call the Vermont way, is something that Washington can learn from the state of Vermont. So we'll end up leading on that also. I'm finally going to sum up, not with more blame, but with thanks. I want to thank Cindy for letting me do this. My son Sid is also here. And of course, this unbelievable team, each of whom does the work of 4, 5, 6 people. Meg, Martha, Chris, Terry, and Dave Sterrett, who couldn't be here today, he's at a wedding, also known as Mr. Single Payer. You can tell because it's on his license plate. Mostly, I don't want to thank those people. I want to thank everyone else who's here, not for coming out today, that's almost nothing, but all the incredible work that you're in. This is a great race, making it winnable. It will not be won unless you do that work, so you should feel very bad and if you want to blame somebody, you can go ahead and blame me. Because all we need for you to win is for you to work. Also, as a practical matter, August 26th primary, if you're on the progressive ballot, I'm printed right on there. If you're voting in the Democratic ballot, you just have to fill in the oval for write-in and write my name in. It's spelled here. Then I'm going to need you to talk, write letters to the editor, distribute materials, register voters, convince people, twist arms, enthuse, refer, give a ride, plant a lawn sign, and tweet. Now we're adding tweet. And enlist 5 other people to do exactly the same thing that you're doing and share the misery. There are no excuses. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Thank you very much.